The greatest fighter pilot America has ever seen killed more enemy planes than any other U.S. pilot in history. But his story isn't the one you've been told, and the way he died will leave you speechless. December 17, 1944. The skies over the Philippines are about to witness something that's never been done before in American military history. A young farm kid from Wisconsin is about to break a record that stood untouchable for decades. His name is Richard Bong, and today you're going to learn why his story matters more than you think. Because what happened after his greatest achievement is something most people never talk about. Richard Bong grew up in a place where dreams of flying seemed impossible. Poplar, Wisconsin, a tiny farming town where the biggest excitement was watching crops grow. Born on September 24, 1920, Dick Bong was the oldest of 9 kids. 9. His dad, Carl Bong, worked as a Swedish immigrant farmer who broke his back every single day just to keep food on the table. His mother, Dora, held the family together while raising an army of children in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing in Dick's childhood that screamed future war hero. Nothing. He was quiet, really quiet. The kind of kid who'd rather tinker with machines than talk to people. While other boys his way were playing baseball and chasing girls, Dick was taking apart engines and putting them back together. He had this weird obsession with understanding how things worked. And that obsession would eventually save his life more times than anyone could count. But here's the thing about Dick Bong that nobody tells you. He wasn't naturally brave. He wasn't some tough guy who walked around looking for fights. He was actually pretty average, medium height, soft-spoken, the kind of guy you'd walk past on the street without a second glance, and that's exactly what makes his story so incredible. In 1938, when Dick was 18 years old, he enrolled at Superior State Teachers College. His plan was simple: become a teacher, live a quiet life, maybe marry a nice girl and settle down in Wisconsin. That was it. That was the entire plan. But then something happened that changed everything. The college offered a civilian pilot training program. It was part of this government initiative to get more Americans into the air, just in case, a massive global war broke out or something. Dick signed up almost on a whim. He didn't think much of it, just seemed interesting. The first time Dick Bong climbed into a cockpit, something clicked. Not immediately. Not like some Hollywood movie where the hero instantly knows he's found his calling. No, it was gradual. But every time he went up, every time he felt the stick in his hands and the engine vibrating through his whole body, something inside him came alive. He was good at it, really good. His instructors noticed right away. Dick had this natural feel for aircraft that you can't teach. Some people study flying for years and never really get it. Dick got it in weeks. The way he handled the plane, the way he understood air speed and altitude and combat maneuvers without overthinking them. It was like the aircraft became an extension of his body. By 1941, Dick had made a decision. He wasn't going to be a teacher. He was going to be a pilot, and not just any pilot. He wanted to fly fighters for the Army Air Corps. On May 29, 1941, Dick Bong enlisted in the Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet. He was 20 years old, still quiet, still unassuming. Nobody looked at this skinny farm kid and thought future legend. Nobody. His training started at Gardner Field in California, then moved to Luke Field in Arizona. And this is where things get interesting, because Dick Bong was about to reveal something about himself that would define his entire career. He was competitive, insanely competitive, but not in the loud, obnoxious way. He competed quietly. He'd watch other pilots, study what they did, and then go up and do it better, every single time. His gunnery scores were off the charts. His aerobatic skills made his instructors nervous because he pushed the planes harder than they were supposed to be pushed. There's this famous story from his training days that perfectly captures who Dick Bong was. He was flying a P-38 Lightning over the San Francisco Bay Area. Beautiful day, clear skies. And Dick decided to do a little unauthorized stunt flying. He flew so low over a house that he apparently blew laundry off someone's clothesline. Then, and this is the part that got him in serious trouble, he flew down Market Street in San Francisco. Market Street, one of the busiest streets in the city. People on the ground could see his face in the cockpit as he screamed past buildings. His commanding officer was furious, absolutely furious. Dick got called into the office and received one of the worst chewing-outs of his life. But here's what's crazy. The co who yelled at him later admitted that the stunt showed incredible piloting skill. Stupid, reckless, completely against regulations, but skillful. That was Dick Bong, always pushing boundaries, always testing limits, and that attitude would serve him well in combat. In September 1942, Dick received his orders. He was being deployed to the Southwest Pacific Theater, New Guinea, one of the most brutal, unforgiving combat zones in the entire war. The heat was unbearable. The humidity made everything rot. Diseases killed more men than combat. And the Japanese pilots they were facing, they weren't beginners. These were experienced fighters who'd been in the war since it started. Dick arrived at Port Moresby with the 9th Fighter Squadron. He was flying the P-38 Lightning, twin-engine, twin-boom fighter that became his signature aircraft. Some pilots hated the P-38, said it was too big, too heavy, not maneuverable enough for dogfighting. Dick loved it. He understood the plane in ways other pilots didn't. The P-38 wasn't built for tight-turning dogfights like the Japanese Zero. It was built for speed and altitude. Dick figured out how to use those advantages. He'd climb higher than the enemy, dive down with incredible speed, take his shots, and use that speed to climb right back up before the Zeros could react. Boom and zoom tactics. Hit and run. It was perfect for the P-38's strengths. His first confirmed kill came on December 27, 1942. A Japanese fighter over New Guinea. Dick didn't celebrate. He didn't brag. He just added it to his tally and kept flying. January 7, 1943. Dick shot down 2 more Japanese planes. His kill count was now 3. He was becoming known among his squadron as a reliable pilot, someone who got results. But here's something people don't understand about aerial combat in World War II. It wasn't like the movies. You didn't have these long, dramatic dogfights with planes spinning and turning for minutes on end. Most combat engagements lasted seconds. Maybe 30 seconds if it went long. You had one chance, maybe 2. If you missed, the enemy was gone or you were dead. Dick became a master of that one chance. His gunnery was so precise that he rarely needed more than one burst to down an enemy plane. He'd get in close, really close, sometimes within 100 feet, and then he'd unleash everything. 4 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, all concentrated on one target. Devastating. July 26, 1943. Dick shot down 4 Japanese planes in one day. 4. His total was now 16 confirmed kills. He was being talked about, not just in his squadron, across the entire theater. Newspapers back home started picking up his name. But Dick didn't change. He stayed quiet, humble. When reporters asked him about his tactics, he'd shrug and say he just got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. This was skill, practice, and an almost supernatural ability to read combat situations. His commanding officers noticed something else about Dick Bong. He was a natural teacher. When new pilots arrived, terrified and inexperienced, Dick would take them aside, show them techniques, explain how to survive. He wasn't doing it for recognition. He just didn't want to see young kids die because they didn't know what they were doing. One pilot later said that Dick Bong saved his life 3 times before he ever saw combat, just by teaching him how to think in the air. October 1943. Dick's kill count hit 21. He'd surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 kills. People started calling him America's Ace of Aces. The title made him uncomfortable. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to fly. But the media didn't care what he wanted. Dick Bong was now a symbol, A farm kid from Wisconsin who was beating the best pilots Japan had to offer. The American public ate it up. Here was a real hero. Quiet, humble, deadly effective. November 1943. Dick went on leave back to the United States. War bond tour, public appearances, handshakes with politicians. He hated every second of it. He wasn't built for attention. He was built for the cockpit. But during this tour, something happened that would change his life in a completely different way. He met a girl, Marjorie Vattendahl. She was from Superior, Wisconsin, beautiful, smart, and completely unimpressed by his war hero status. She treated him like a normal person. Dick fell hard. They started writing letters, a lot of letters. Dick had found something he cared about beyond flying, someone to come home to. April 12, 1944. Dick returned to the Pacific Theater. His kill count when he left was 28. The current American record was 26, held by Eddie Rickenbacker from World War I. Dick had already beaten it, but he wasn't done. The Japanese were getting desperate. Their tactics were becoming more aggressive. Kamikaze attacks were starting to appear. The war in the Pacific was entering its bloodiest phase. Dick flew mission after mission. His P-38 became legendary. The ground crews painted scoreboards on the side, little Japanese flags for every confirmed kill. The number kept growing. July 12, 1944. Dick shot down 2 more planes. His total was now 36 confirmed kills. August 17, 1944. 2 more kills, 38 total. September 1944. Dick was ordered back to the United States again, not for a war bond tour this time. The military brass had a different plan. They wanted to keep him alive. Dick Bong had become too valuable as a symbol. Losing him in combat would be a massive blow to American morale. Dick protested. He wanted to keep flying combat missions, but orders were orders. October 10, 1944. Before he left the Pacific for good, Dick flew 1 more mission. He shot down 2 more Japanese fighters. His final tally, 40 confirmed kills, 40. No American pilot has ever beaten that record, not in World War II, not in Korea, not in Vietnam, not ever. December 12, 1944. Dick Bong received the Medal of Honor from General Douglas MacArthur himself. The ceremony took place in the Philippines. MacArthur pinned the medal on Dick's chest and said something that stuck with Dick forever. Major Richard Bong, who has ruled the air from New Guinea to the Philippines, I now induct you into the Society of the Bravest of the Brave, the wearers of the Congressional Medal of Honor of the United States. Dick stood there, uncomfortable as always with the attention, and just nodded. He didn't give a big speech. He didn't cry or salute dramatically. He just accepted the medal and moved on. But here's what nobody knew at that ceremony. Dick had already decided something. He was done with combat. He'd survived when so many others hadn't. He'd beaten records that might never be broken, and he had Marjorie waiting for him back home. On February 10, 1945, Dick Bong married Marjorie Vattendahl in Superior, Wisconsin. Finally, after years of war and death and constant danger, Dick had found peace. He was assigned to a non-combat role as a test pilot. Safer, less stressful, a chance to actually live the life he'd been fighting for. The war in the Pacific was winding down. Victory was coming. Dick had made it. Against all odds, the quiet farm kid from Wisconsin had survived one of the most dangerous jobs in the most dangerous war in human history. And then on August 6, 1945, everything changed. Dick was at Burbank, California, Lockheed Air Terminal. He was test flying a new jet, the P-38 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. Dick had only flown it a handful of times. Jets were different, faster, less forgiving. That morning, Dick climbed into the cockpit of the P-80. The engine spooled up. Everything seemed normal. He taxied down the runway, throttle forward. The jet accelerated, faster, faster. Wheels left the ground. And then something went wrong. Witnesses on the ground saw the P-80 climb to about 500 feet. The engine coughed, sputtered. Black smoke poured from the back. Dick tried to turn back to the runway. He almost made it. Almost. The plane rolled, inverted, and slammed into the ground at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The explosion could be seen for miles. Richard Bong, America's ace of aces, the greatest fighter pilot in United States history, was dead. He was 24 years old. He'd been married for less than 6 months. The same day Dick Bong died, August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The biggest news story in human history broke the same day America lost its greatest pilot. Dick's death was buried in the newspapers. A small story on page 6, maybe page 8. Most Americans never even knew he'd died. Marjorie Bong was devastated. She'd waded through years of war, through countless missions, through every dangerous moment Dick faced in combat, and he died testing a plane in California. The cruelty of it was almost unbearable. So why does Richard Bong's story matter? Why should you care about a pilot who died almost 80 years ago? Because Dick Bong represents something we've lost. He was a hero who didn't want to be a hero. He was the best at what he did, but he never bragged about it. He could have leveraged his fame into anything: movie deals, book contracts, a political career. He wanted none of it. He just wanted to marry his girl and live a quiet life. In an age where everyone is desperate for attention, where people will do anything to go viral or get famous, Dick Bong's humility stands out. He had every reason to be arrogant. He'd achieved something no other American ever has: 40 confirmed kills, the Medal of Honor, national fame, and he treated it all like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. Because of pilots like Dick Bong, the United States won air superiority in the Pacific. Because of his skill and bravery, countless American ground troops and sailors had cover from above. His 40 kills weren't just numbers. They were 40 times he protected his fellow soldiers. 40 times he gave someone else a better chance of making it home. The P-38 Lightning he flew is now on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. You can go see it, stand next to it, touch it. The same plane that Dick Bong used to dominate the skies over the Pacific is preserved for future generations. There's a statue of Dick Bong in Superior, Wisconsin, his hometown. It shows him in his flight suit looking up at the sky. Every year people gather there to remember him. Veterans, historians, regular people who just want to pay respects to a man who gave everything. But here's what haunts me about Dick Bong's story. He survived the war. He beat the odds. He made it home. And then a mechanical failure in a test just took him away. The randomness of it, the unfairness. It reminds us that heroism doesn't guarantee a happy ending. Sometimes the good guys don't ride off into the sunset. Marjorie Bong never remarried. She lived until 2003, 58 years after Dick died. She kept his memory alive, gave interviews, attended memorial services, made sure people didn't forget the quiet farm kid who became the greatest American fighter pilot in history. Dick Bong's record of 40 confirmed kills still stands. It's been almost 80 years. American pilots in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan have all tried. None have come close. The nature of warfare changed. Jet combat is different. Air-to-air engagements are rare now. Dick's record might stand forever. And maybe that's fitting, because Dick Bong wasn't just a skilled pilot. He was the right person at the right time with the right combination of talent, training, and character. You can't manufacture that. You can't create it through programs or better technology. Some things are just lightning in a bottle. The greatest tragedy of Dick Bong's story isn't that he died young. It's that he never got to be old. He never got to tell his grandkids about his experiences. He never got to see the world he helped save. He never got to grow old with Marjorie, sitting on a porch somewhere in Wisconsin, watching the sun set over fields he grew up working. But his legacy lives on. Every time an American pilot climbs into a cockpit, they're following in the footsteps of Richard Bong. Every time someone talks about the greatest fighter pilots in history, his name comes up. Not because he sought glory, but because he earned it through skill, bravery, and a deep sense of duty. The skies over the Pacific are quiet now. The war that defined Dick Bong's life is distant history, but somewhere up there in the clouds and the blue beyond, the spirit of America's ace of aces still flies, still pushes the limits, still protects the people below. Richard Bong died on August 6, 1945, but his story will never die, because we need heroes like him. We need to remember that greatness doesn't have to be loud, that true bravery is often quiet, that the best among us sometimes come from the smallest towns and the humblest beginnings. Subscribe if you want more untold stories from World War II.